So we have a confirmation with a second opinion that he definitely has prostate cancer.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Reggie Hicks, once again, producer of the documentary and outreach project, If You Are My Brothers, and host of the If You Are My Brothers podcast, which you are listening to and seeing right now. I want to welcome everyone watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook Live, and also to those listening on your favorite podcast platforms later on. This is the second episode in our four-part series during Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Now, today's conversation is titled Rethinking Prostate Cancer Equity, Innovation, and Hope with Dr. Shaun Owens. And together we'll explore the challenges and opportunities in advancing prostate cancer equity, the role of technology in decision making, which I'm really interested in learning more about, and what the future holds for prevention and education. So important. Now, before we dive into it, quick reminder. This podcast is not a substitute for your medical team. The opinions and medical issues we discuss are not a replacement for treatment. All right. Always consult your healthcare provider. And just one more note. Some of today's content may or may not be mature in nature, so please listen accordingly. Now, we call this series Prostate Cancer Conversations, and we invite you to join us in the chat with your questions or comments. So don't be shy. This is real life that we're talking about. And also remember to like, share, subscribe as we go on this journey together. To learn more about this podcast and the If You Are My Brothers documentary and community engagement project, always visit our website at ifyouaremybrothers.org. Now, we're going to get right to it because we got a lot to go through this afternoon. I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Shaun Owens, Associate Professor at the University of South Carolina's College of Social Work and Director of the Healthy Aging Research and Technology Lab. I think it's called HEART. His work spans prostate cancer, health equity, and smart home technologies that help older adults age with independence. I saw a news story on that. It's very, very interesting. Now, Dr. Owens has published widely on prostate cancer, including strategies for recruiting African American men to research, developing a computer-based decision aid, and advancing shared decision-making in screening and treatment. He earned his Master's of Public Health from Emory University and his Ph.D. from the University of South Carolina. Dr. Owens, we want to thank you so much for joining us. And one thing that I will say that's really, really, really important on your bio is that you are a member of the #1 fraternity in the world, Alpha Phi Alpha.
06.
06. I had to tell you, I ran into a guy yesterday. I think it was yesterday, and we were talking about fraternities, and so he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a member of fraternity now," and so we kind of looked at each other, and then he said, "Well, I'm a member of the #1 fraternity." I was like, "I'm a Kappa," and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm a member of the first."
Exactly.
And only, so we just laughed about it. So we're all Divine Nine, so we love that. But I want to thank you for taking your time to be with us this afternoon. I think, what we're going to talk about is so important. And as we get started, I was just curious as to what first drew you to public health in general and prostate cancer research in particular. Did you know someone personally who had prostate cancer, or was this just something that really kind of stuck with you? And I'm asking because I know that you had mentioned in an interview that your aunt had dementia, which really was sort of an inspiration for you to do the research in the area of dementia. Just wondering if that was also the case in dealing with prostate cancer.
So it was maybe 2007. I was in Atlanta. I think I was in my master's program in public health. So my general interest in public health was At one point, I would, like many people, I thought being a physician was the only way to go. So we didn't know anything else about public health. But there at Case Western, I ended up running into a student who was majoring in public health. She kind of
Mhm.
told me all about it. And I was like, wow, okay. That's something that I may want to be a part of if I don't decide to go to medical school. But I can tell you those physics and organic chemistries didn't turn out quite the way that I wanted them to.
Right.
So it was another path that could help me make an impact on the world. So I'm glad that I chose, public health. But while at the School of Public Health, at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory, I was attending a church, an AME church called Mount Zion AME, which is still in existence there
Mhm.
in Atlanta. And I had, I think I attended a health fair on a Saturday morning. I'll never forget. We were in the basement of the church, and they had invited all of these speakers, from cardiologists to, folks to talk to us about proper nutrition. And in any case, it was three guys. There was Greg Bolden, it was Dr. Alan Simpson, and it was John Hollis. It was three gentlemen that were
Mhm.
part of an organization called the Comprehensive Men's Health Initiative. And
Mhm.
when they presented, they talked about the burden of prostate cancer on Black men. And I had never heard about this before. Both John Hollis and Dr. Alan Simpson were actually survivors of prostate cancer. And when they told their stories, the room was quiet. I was especially quiet because I had heard so much about other cancers, particularly breast cancer. Breast Cancer Month, everybody's in pink.
Yeah.
The whole
Pink. Yeah.
season pink. It's a pink parade everywhere you go. But everybody was quiet about prostate cancer. So, really, once I started to speak more to those guys, I started to get involved in education around Atlanta at the time. I started getting up on Saturday mornings, helping those guys go around to other churches to spread the word about the importance of learning about screening, going out to make a shared decision with your doctor about screening.
Mhm.
So I seen a place and space where I felt that I could make impact, hearing about those brothers' stories and their mission and charge to go out to get other men informed. So I felt this is a place where I can fit and make impact where other people aren't even talking about it. So that's what inspired me to get involved in this prostate cancer space. And of course, I went on later to earn a PhD, and my focus of my research also was none other than prostate cancer and how we support men in their shared
Right.
decision making.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because, excuse me, a lot of times, and we were talking right before about how I even got into this. Outside of being a prostate cancer survivor, um, prior to that, it was somebody else's story. And we talked about my fraternity brother Ralph,
Mhm.
and really following him and being a part, and then getting involved because of his story. And then when I was diagnosed while doing this documentary and following him around, I was like, then I became really committed. But I think, you're right in the sense that a lot of times it is about the story that kind of, you know, brings attention to it, and people can relate, brothers can relate to someone telling their story about it. Um, one issue or one thing that you have been working on is, and this comes up all the time, is this thing about health equity.
Okay.
Um, and it's been around, and can you really talk about what that is, and what's the significant equity issues in prostate cancer today?
So, health equity as it relates to prostate cancer um, centers around how can we get equal opportunity to access care and have outcomes like prostate health outcomes that are pretty much at about the same standard as men of other races. But unfortunately, as you know, at this particular time, that African American men have about a 1 point, they're diagnosed at about a 1.7 times, or they're 1.7 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and about 2 to 3 times more likely to die from prostate cancer. So that is than their white counterparts. So that is an issue of inequity. And we also have a higher, a more serious genetic predisposition to prostate cancer, which means we have more aggressive forms of prostate cancer, and we are also diagnosed later. So when the prostate cancer is discovered in a lot of African American men, unfortunately, it is further along. So it's in later stages. So you have a much lower 5-year survival rate. That's usually how we, measure
Hmm.
success
Right,
in the
right.
treatment by 5-year survival rate. So that's, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. I was gonna ask you. So learning about it later, and I know you've done some work on cultural community factors that
Hmm.
that shape men's decisions about screening and
Yep.
and what are some of those? I mean, we have a disposition. I mean, it's there, but it just seems like there are a whole lot of other factors that don't allow us to
Yep.
say I need to do something.
There's many social determinants of health and of prostate cancer. So you have things like our historical mistrust of the healthcare system that we can't ignore. Some folks just don't trust the doctor. They don't want to go to the doctor. There's a lot of stigma around prostate cancer because it does affect manhood, sexual performance, things like that. So men don't want to hear
Hmm.
anything
Oh
that will
yeah.
affect that performance. We also have, lack of access to care. So all men don't have equal access. On our end as African American men, many times we may not have the insurance, or we may live in a more rural area that where we don't have as much access to, to care, to things like screening. We might also um, not have the education. In a lot of the previous publications that I wrote, and a lot of studies I've been involved in, we found that have a men often don't have a very good knowledge of prostate cancer, things like prostate cancer anatomy, where it's located, how it's screened for, what are, if any, controversies around the screening, how is the cancer screened for, how is it treated. Like, we lack that education. So all of those things factor into, the disproportionate rates of mortality that we're seeing from prostate cancer.
So in all of that, in your studies, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those studies. What were the barriers then? I mean, I know you were recruiting. I saw you do a TV interview. You're recruiting African American men. Well, no, I think you were recruiting for your Alzheimer's study, but in your study in recruiting men to be a part of, you're trying to learn what's happening. What were the barriers and how did you? Because like look, we don't want to go to the doctor, let alone be a part of a study. Right. Right. We know what happened, back at Tuskegee. So we're like, I
Yeah,
don't know about that.
exactly. And that's so
You know.
interesting that you mentioned Tuskegee, because one of the earlier studies I was involved with as a doctoral student was we went out into the community and we recruited African American men and women into a prostate cancer study in a rural area of South Carolina. And the goal there was to understand people's perceptions of what medical research is, what clinical
Mm,
trials are, and also, you know, what were their perceptions like? What was their openness to participating? Like, what types of words come to mind when we
mhm,
mention the word clinical trial or medical research? And people said, hey, Tuskegee, that's what came up, things
mm,
like that. Like, there was still sort of a mistrust. Now, there was an openness under certain conditions that people would participate in research, but people, we notice in some cases didn't necessarily have a clear understanding of what that terminology meant. So when we use certain vernacular or medical or research speak, uh, that's not going to get people, into studies and trusting you. You really need to explain in plain language, what are your goals of the study? What are you going to have to do? What's going to happen to my data? All of those things are necessary when you go into these communities, and also having people on board from the community, these opinion leaders, folks who they trust, who you can partner with from the conceptualization of the study. That's super important.
Hmm.
That not coming up with the community as, okay, these people are the guinea pig, and that's another word that was used.
Yeah.
These people are the guinea pig for my study. No, we're partners in this community-based participatory research. That's what we're going to say. So I'm going to go to them at conceptualization. Many of us use things like methods like attracting a community advisory board, like having people around you,
That you trust,
who
and
that you
and the
trust,
community trust, right?
that the community trusts, and folks like yourself. If I was doing a study on individuals who had prostate cancer, I want to invite survivors to the table to say, hey, what questions do you think are most important for us to answer? These are the things I'm seeing in the literature. What are you seeing? And let the community also be contributors to the conceptualization of that initial research before you even start. That
Hmm.
way, you might have a higher likelihood of gaining buy-in from the community. So one, they have to trust you. Two, they have to understand what it is that you're trying to do. And three, what is going to be the long-term benefit for them. And excuse my vernacular here, but you don't want to go out. They don't want to feel like they're being pimped.
Right.
The
Yeah.
community doesn't want to feel that way. They want to feel
Hmm.
like, okay, we're a partner in this research, and this is the realistic expectation of the outcomes from this study. So I think those are important things when you go into a research study that can influence how well you're able to recruit or attract people into your study.
Now, for most of your studies really didn't involve any kind of invasive or any kind of drugs or anything like that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Um, but how do we get our folk, and men in particular, um, when it comes to you know new kinds of drugs or medication? We're affected by it so much, and I hear all the time that we need to be a part of any study that is so important, particularly when we get whatever it is more than anybody else. And is Tuskegee still? I mean, I know Tuskegee. I know the stigma. It's just kind of there. Is it getting out of? Is it becoming generational, or is it kind of being passed down, or are the Gen Zers and the millennials kind of like they're sort of not knowing what Tuskegee is? I mean, are we finally getting this sort of out of our cultural system, I guess is what I'm saying.
I would hope so, but I don't think so at this particular time.
Mm,
Like I think the youngest people who were participants in my study back then were maybe around their 30s. So they were relatively young at the time. And this might have happened maybe some 13 years ago or so, 13 or so years ago when we did that study.
mhm.
So I would hope that that was leaving, but I think there's an importance to recognizing that that was a reality,
Right.
and educating people on the importance of understanding concepts like informed consent. And that's something that we talk about often, is to negate some of the mistrust. We were educating people about what you should look for, in a consent form, to understand that written documentation and understanding the voluntary nature of most studies, meaning that you can pull out if you start feeling uncomfortable. But it's the goal to get people to understand exactly what it is that you're asking them to do. And this happens as a part and is required as a part of all, research studies that are, especially those conducted by academic or medical institutions, we have something called an institutional review board in place now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can tell you, as far as the Gen Zers and others, especially here, like in the College of Social Work and Public Health, most people, as a part of their curriculum, are now required to take at least a research course. In that research course, we do go through, we do talk about all of those, dark days, like
Right.
Tuskegee, in research, and we try to impress upon them the importance of, being responsible, when you're a researcher. So responsible research, ethically sound research, and going through an institutional review board, and the importance of that, and what should be in a consent form. So what I'm hoping is that in the near future, we won't have so much, mistrust around some of the research, because we'll have those things in place, like, you know, uh, these forms, like this informed consent,
Yeah.
that people can know how to navigate, know how to read. Now, that's not to take away from the fact that, we have differing, levels of education, and, um, things like that.
Yeah, I remember because I opted to have my prostate removed, and there was a study. They were taking building a tissue bank, and so they asked me, "Would you like to be a part of the study?" And I remember signing a bunch of papers. I don't remember what they said, but so
Mhm.
they said, "We're going to take your prostate, we're going to dissect it, and then we're going to, put." And I figured, well, if that helps, I mean, it's not anything I'm not going to have it anyway, so I didn't have any problem with that. And I think if we, just and I know some guys that didn't. They were like, no, no, I don't want y'all doing nothing. But I'm like, you don't
Mhm.
have it anymore, so be a part of it. But they were like adamant about, nah, I'm not doing that. Um, I wanted to ask you about we're getting into your study, the use of technology. I
Mhm.
remember, speaking of trials, I was a part of a trial. I think it might have been through the Department of Defense, which, interestingly enough, a lot of prostate research comes through, or used to
Mhm.
come through there. And I remember, and I don't know if you were part of the study or not, there was an avatar. I was on the computer, and this guy came up and he talked about his issue with in prostate cancer and trying to make a decision. I remember it was in a park, and he was kind of on a bench. His name might have been Amos. I can't remember,
Ne-
but it was
Was it?
this
Mhm.
interactive kind of avatar that I was dealing with. Is that something that you were part of, or is that kind of
Was
what you're
this was
using?
this ask was this Ask Nathan? Was it through the Centers for Disease Control? If he was on a park bench, I think, was he an African American man on a
Yes.
park bench?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's Ask Nathan.
It might have
That
been
was
Nathan. Yeah.
produced through the CDC. So interestingly enough, I didn't start. I'm very familiar with that project. So as a part of my doctoral dissertation, what I developed was an avatar-led module, because back then they were using what we called embodied conversational agents, or what they're called in the science, in the
Hmm.
literature.
Hmm.
But essentially, it's an avatar or character, human-like, with human-like capabilities.
Hmm.
So I thought, because these were being used in areas like psychology and others, people were doing studies. I thought, okay, what if I develop something like this, building on our prior research in the community and our community focused in-person education program? What if I can turn this into an avatar-led module that will do two things? One, educate the man on various aspects of prostate cancer and the screening process,
Hmm.
in order to help them make a shared decision, and two, engage them in a role play that can make them more comfortable having that conversation with a doctor. So they will build their comfortability, or what we would call self-efficacy, with making a shared decision with a doctor. So in any case, I developed that module then, and I've evaluated it amongst a lot of African American men here in South Carolina, and we found that it did have some pretty good outcomes as far as knowledge and self-efficacy and things like that. But after that point, I was on to some other research. related to prostate cancer.
Mhm.
And I received a call from some folks who were working with CDC, and they had seen some of my publications and reached out and said, "Hey, can you provide some consultation on the development of another avatar-led module that will exist, out in the public domain?" And I couldn't say no at all. I was like,
Right,
"Okay,
right.
of course, I'll sign on."
Was that the CDC one that came out with the Nathan guy, or was that
That was
before,
the
after
CDC one
yours?
that came out with it.
Yeah.
That was after, yeah. It
Mhm.
was after because that's the thing. Being in an academic institution, you aren't always the first to market necessarily because research is a slow process sometimes. So I didn't have a product that was out there publicly available, and I didn't necessarily have the funds at that time
Right.
to make a product of that caliber. So, but I had published on it. I had showed some images of it. I had talked about its functionality. So everything was there showing that I had a prior attempt, and it may have been someone that attempted prior to me. But however,
Right.
I was glad that they called and seen that research and wanted me to provide some consultation on that product.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." And they sent me a gift card too, so that was kind of cool. So, in doing this, were there any surprises? And well, let me ask you this: W- what what kind of brought about the idea? I mean, evidently they saw your work. The CDC says, "Oh, this is a good thing to do." What is the connection between kind of this avatar, this technology, and men using it? Does it diffuse kind of? Is it like, I don't know this thing, but it's not a person, so I can maybe
Mhm.
connect to it better? I mean, what's the kind of motivation?
So I think it's a couple of things. One, as you know, you can receive prostate cancer information any type of way. Like you can go online, but going online takes a certain level of computer literacy to be able to search and navigate the web for this information. So that's difficult for people with, again, lower education, lower computer literacy levels, lower health literacy levels.
Mhm.
Uh, they try with most organizations like maybe your CDC and others, they try to keep language at around no higher than an eighth grade reading level. Like that's just standard sort of practice.
Right.
That's not always the
But that's
case.
advertising too. I think
Yeah.
advertising even lower than that, like sixth grade. Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
keep it there. So you have those issues when you need to search for the information, but you have to think about how will the information be available otherwise. So maybe a pamphlet. So I needed something a little bit more dynamic, like something in between, something that would one capture the attention of a person, because that's for one. I think what I found through the focus groups when I was developing this it was called I Decide, is the name of the avatar led module that I developed.
Mhm.
So when I was building this in collaboration with the community and of course experts here at the University of South Carolina, I had to ask a series of questions like, why would you use this? Uh, would this be a better way of getting the information? And what I found through this research is that men simply felt like, okay, once I get here, I don't think it's necessarily the avatar that keeps me here. I think then the information will speak for itself.
Mhm.
But you need
Just
something that
grabbing them.
attracts the men. Yeah, you
Right.
need something that attracts the men there. And also, it keeps people's attention when you have some type of interactivity. So, in the education portion of the avatars presenting to them, but it does a couple of things. One, it kind of stops, it re-engages them in some question and answers
Mhm.
to make sure that they're getting the information because it is a lot of information at once. We want to make sure they're getting the information. It's interactive because it is speaking to you. In the second half, it does engage them in like almost like a mimicked role play that's based on a decision tree. At that point in time, AI wasn't as popular as it is now.
Right. Yeah.
So back then, you had to develop a decision tree. So if they answer this way, what will you tell them? So it had that type of tree. But the whole goal was to get them to a shared decision that they felt comfortable with and leave them confident that they knew what questions to ask when they went to the doctor. So a part of that, for example, I'll give you one example. In the I Decide module, the first question in the role play has maybe two or three different types of questions that they can ask the doctor about prostate cancer. At
Hmm.
that time, the prostate cancer recommendations were very controversial. Not everybody was telling you to go
Right.
out and get screened for prostate cancer or to
Right.
talk about it, to even share the decision. So back then, it was important that the question that you posed to the doctor was, I'm here to talk about prostate cancer screening. What are your, blah, 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 blah. Not, hey, I'm here for a basic checkup. But I had that as an option. So if they chose, I'm here for a basic checkup, I made sure that this module told them that prostate cancer screening, though your doctor may be one to give the PSA or the digital rectal exam or the prostate specific antigen test as a part
Hmm.
of an annual screening, that's not what the recommendations say. So you need to be more specific. So it would almost coach them as well about how you should have this conversation. So I think that interactivity set it apart from any pamphlet or any other static, resource, like
Right.
even
Right.
searching on the web at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. It made them. It engaged them in kind of this decision making and from point A to point B and yeah. I was wondering. You mentioned something about. I now remember back when there were so many, and it seems to me that's still the case. Like when to get checked, when to, what level of PSA means you need to get a biopsy. And then there's a lot of information out there that says, if it's slow growing, then you don't need to do anything. But,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the surveillance, watchful waiting, we called it back in the day. And what I found is a lot of men are just really kind of confused, even confused when, to a degree, when there is a diagnosis. And we had a panel on, and you had mentioned earlier about, following men that are at different stages. And we had one, actually a frat brother of ours who is now in that kind of surveillance mode and this has been going on for almost a year. PSA going up and down. They know that there's some cancer there. He's sort of like, and he's waiting for the doctor to kind of say, okay, now is the time to do something. Um, but there just seems to be a whole lot of confusion. And two of the men on the panel were diagnosed in their 40s.
Mm-hmm.
I was diagnosed in early 50s. So it just and I'm gonna tell you, if somebody says to me, well, your PSA is not high enough to really make a difference. I mean, I went to a clinic because I didn't have health insurance at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a clinic that my fraternity brother that we were roommates in college was running in Augusta. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
was in healthcare and I said, I need some blood work done. It's been a year or two. And so my PSA came back, it was over 1. And he said, well, your PSA is a little high. I'm like, but it's 1.0. Why is that high? And he said, well, just kind of take a look at it. And that started the whole thing when Ralph and I started, when I started chronicling his story. Um, but when I was diagnosed, I mean, what? It was 2.2 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had my medical team, my healthcare team stayed on it. But I'm just wondering, I like with Ralph, he, I mean, 100, I don't know what was going on prior to that. And he never really talked about I don't think he wanted to admit that he really didn't, check it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so are we getting closer to maybe there being some kind of this is what you need to do when you're at this level, or is it just maybe just self-advocacy? I mean, is
We are
that where we are?
closer. I can say we're closer than where we ever were before. Back when I started this research, there were diverging recommendations from major cancer authorities like the American Cancer Society, the American Urological Association, and the United States Preventive Services Task Force. Their recommendations were very different maybe even 12 or 13 years ago
Mm-hmm.
when I first started. So the American Cancer Society was the first to have recommendations for African American men and those at higher risk. So those who had a relative to start screening as early as like around age 40, or to
Mm-hmm.
not start screening. Sorry, let me take that back. There was no
Okay.
recommendations for screening. It was making an informed or shared decision about the screening. So understanding the benefits, risk, and uncertainties of the screening and going to speak with your doctor was what the American Cancer Society
But,
recommended at the time.
but that's
Where
kind of confusing. So it's like screen or not screen, know your PSA or not.
so what it
That's
is more so knowing things like your family history. That's super important. And then also understanding that our tests are not perfect. So the DRE that you're going to take doesn't necessarily is not necessarily perfect at detecting
right,
cancer,
right,
nor is the PSA or the
right.
prostate specific antigen test, because it can be falsely elevated or lowered by things other than prostate cancer, like
Mm-hmm.
certain supplements, certain
Mm-hmm.
medications, certain physical activities can falsely elevate. Now it won't send it, I guess, to 100, but it can elevate it and leave
Oh
you with
yeah,
a scare. And
yeah.
also, the argument of the controversy is around, are we detecting prostate cancers that are indolent or those that won't necessarily lead to mortality? So, what we mean is that what would happen if we left this cancer alone? Would it still lead to, mortality? You know, because not a lot, because since it's slow growing, you said that again, the
Mm-hmm.
prostate cancer is so slow growing.
In some,
So,
yeah,
yeah, in
yeah,
most cases, it's so slow
right.
growing. So, if we caught it and you had cancer, would it be more damaging or detrimental to you for me to operate on it, which has a much higher chance of leaving you with side effects that'll change the rest of your life in a different way? So that's sort of the argument for these tests, is that they're again not perfect. So you need to really understand these things about the tests, the risk, benefits, and uncertainties of the screening, and then go talk to your doctor based on your family history and other things, other facets of your health, about whether or not you should screen for prostate cancer. And that conversation should also include something about the next step. I think it's very important when men are deciding on screening. You kind of need to know a little bit about what comes next. You kind of need to know a little bit about, hey, if you find it here, this is what we're going to do. If it's like in your case, if we find that your PSA is at 4, let's just say for your age and you're pretty
Mm-hmm.
young, the options are we can retest in X amount of months, uh,
Right.
or we could, move straight forward to biopsy, which won't likely to be the case. Often you're going to retest, and they're going
Mm-hmm.
to look at the change between, your last reading and this reading, and that kind of tells you a lot about, you know, whether or not cancer might be present, even if your PSA might be a little low, not super
Mm-hmm.
low, but I'm just saying, if you change, like in your case, you said from a 2 to a 3 in the matter of a few months, yeah, something might be wrong. Whereas most people recommend, okay, a PSA cutoff of 4.0, that being
Mm-hmm.
the highest. But I think is equally important is looking at the level of PSA within reason.
Right.
Um, if it's 100, yeah, I'm concerned. I'm really concerned. But if it's 4, I'm like, or even 4.5, I'm like, okay, well, let's see. Let's see what this next reading might turn out to be. So those are just some of my general thoughts. But to get back really to your question, we're closer than ever now because the American Urological Association, as well as the American Cancer Society, both acknowledge the fact that African American men and people with a history of prostate cancer may need to start conversations about screening earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we made a lot of progress. United States Preventive Services Task Force, they kind of recognize that African American men may be at higher risk, but not enough for them to change their recommendations. their earliest age at which you should start conversations about screening is about between 50 and 55, whereas everybody else is earlier. But
Right.
before, it was a lot more scattered.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. Just a couple of other questions as we close out. Looking at the future, it was interesting. I was with a young man. He's probably early 40s, and and so as I do most often, and especially during Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him if he knew what I said, do you know what your PSA is? And he's like, what is that? Is that like a video game? I was like, and he was halfway joking, but he didn't know what it was. He
Yeah.
was like, is that a video game? And I'm like, no. So I was explaining it to him. And what was interesting in the conversation was, and I don't, and I'm just saying, he said to me this morning, the word prostate was on my mind. I don't know why. And then you said this about the PSA. I need to find out what my PSA is, and I need to start. And I was like, yeah, because and I told him my story. But that being said, if there was one thing you can change about prostate cancer education in the US, what would it be? What would you change? And if you could fix one barrier to prostate health equity, what would
Okay.
that be?
I think these are excellent questions. Excellent. I think one thing I would change about the education are two things. I would say the message and the modality I would change. So the message being, I would have more of a positive spin because we need to be able to reduce stigma around prostate cancer. Like the
Mhm.
women are on it. I can tell you that
Yeah.
right now. We're way behind them. They're marching, they have their pink and everything,
Yeah.
and it's okay to talk about breast cancer. I think we need to start having those conversations and making the conversations more positive. Like most of the time we hear about prostate cancer, somebody has found it, they're going through, they're in a tough position. We need to start framing the narrative as, if you catch it early, if you start these screenings, if you start conversations with family about when, if they had prostate cancer and what age they were diagnosed. If you start having those conversations earlier, we can catch it earlier. If you catch it early within the first, I think, maybe 3 stages, you will have between a 95 and 99%
Yeah.
5-year survival rate if you
Yeah.
catch it. Whereas that drops to about 35% if you're in stage 4.
Yeah.
So I think we need to emphasize the, the notion of, we need to take care of our prostate health. And this needs to be a responsibility of all men, like in educating folks when they are young age, like 20 or so, and start having open dialogue about that so it becomes more commonplace. So it
Hmm.
can one day become a part of the conversation when you go to your annual visit to talk about your prostate. So I think that's one, changing the message, and two, changing the modalities and how we discuss prostate cancer. So I am very supportive of the grassroots, efforts that we've had, and barbershops and churches and things like that.
Right.
But I think it's equally important to use platforms like the one you have. I think entertainment is part of the reason I was attracted to, continue on with prostate cancer education. I wanted to use a different modality, and that's why I hopped into the seat. We might not see an avatar or this character as entertainment, but it sort of is.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
plan out the moves and stuff. It's a script that goes
Hmm.
with that. So
Hmm.
you have to pull that in to your education. And I think we pay more attention to entertainment sources than anything else. So I think we need to become more comfortable with forms like this. I think we need to be more comfortable writing these scenarios about prostate cancer into scripts. I think we need to become more vocal. I don't, I'm very supportive of breast cancer or whatever, but I think we need just as much hurrah in September about prostate cancer. I want to see everybody in blue, just like we
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
everybody in
Yeah.
pink in
Yeah. We should
October.
see the NFL should be wearing blue this month. I
Exactly.
never understood why that connection wasn't made, because they wear pink, in next month, which is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
And I think, to your point, I noticed my son, who is a millennial, and he and his wife just had our first grandchild here last week. So,
Oh,
just shout out to them.
congratulations. That's all right.
Thank you. Thank you. But it's funny because that generation has a lot of these kids, they don't have an issue with seeing a therapist. As a matter of
Exactly.
fact, it's almost like this rite of passage. You seeing the therapist. I mean, it's kind of like a cool thing. You're not seeing the therapist. What's going on? And I remember, the stigma in our community is,
Hmm.
the two things: you don't talk about nothing down there, and you don't talk about nothing up here, because that's just that, you just stay away from that.
It's off
And
limits.
I'm hoping, like you said, that this generation is not having an issue with that as much. I mean, there's still some stigma there, but they're not having as much of an issue. Maybe we can get to that point, with prostate cancer, and I think that it's happening. I know in the discussions that I've had, men are still not willing to talk about certain things like ED or incontinence.
Mhm.
They're not willing to go deep into how it is affecting, if at all, the relationship. Most men, and I remember Ralph saying to me that any man that tells you they're 100%, they lying, because
Mhm.
you're dealing with something in your body. You're never going to be 100%. You may be 95%,
Mhm.
but most men won't go that far. They'll talk about what they went through as far as treatment and things like that, but not anything about relationships. And we haven't kind of gotten that far yet. But to your point, just getting to the point, we could talk about screening. We could talk about knowing that number. Um, which brings me to one of my final questions is, what gives you hope for men facing prostate cancer today? What do we have on the horizon that we can kind of say, we're headed in the right direction?
So I think more continuity in the recommendations. That's one for recommendations related to screening. So I think that's one positive thing we have for us. I think two, there are genetic screenings that are out now. I won't
Mm,
say that they are available to everyone. But I think that holds promise for the future to be able to get early genetic testing to see what your actual risk is for prostate cancer. And that might also guide your treatment decisions if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer. I think we have more than ever, I think, burgeoning, you know, uh, resources for prostate cancer. Some of my most recent research looked at the possibility for virtual assistants like an Alexa or
or
Amazon
using
Echo
AI.
for
Yeah.
you to be able to get recommendations from there, and also from generative artificial intelligence like the chat GPTs and things like that. So we've looked at the possibility, and I think maybe in the future, not right now, using that as a sole resource, but being able to use that in conjunction with healthcare provider advice might be, you know, promising for us in the future. And I think also, as far as that, so and that's mostly access to information.
Right.
I
Right.
think also to produce equity, we have to enhance people's access to care in some type of way. And I think how this is going to happen is all could also be through, the expansion of physical, like federally qualified health centers and others, and mobile-based units that could get to people. But for people who cannot get to a doctor, what I'm hoping is that there can be hubs in the community that will lend their spaces to provide access to telehealth opportunities. Like, for example, I see in the future libraries being a destination for people to be able to have some private space where they can go converse with um, a physician or another healthcare provider in that space. And we
Mhm.
also now have some at-home PSA test kits. I don't know much about the accuracy and so forth of these tests,
Right.
but I think that they might improve in the near future. The main concern is using these tests in isolation. That's the main concern from like the American Cancer Society. You're not having anybody to talk to about these results, and you taking the test and sending it in and getting results and being like, oh my goodness, what is this? But I
Right.
think coupling something like telehealth with this type of at-home PSA test kit could lend itself to producing more equitable prostate cancer outcomes in the end. So that's what I see on the horizon.
All right. All right. And I just hope that, when I ask the question, it becomes more of a common thing about, oh yeah, I know what my PSA is, and
Exactly.
it's not a video game. it's it's something you really need to know. This is one thing, and then I'll let you go. What's You mentioned a lot of like opportunities for there being things like in rural communities and things like that. The current landscape that we're in, how do you think that's going to affect um, prostate cancer awareness and really other things that, with so many with changes in the CDC and with, this whole healthcare thing. What do we do?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, a lot of uncertainty out there. A lot of the research, a lot of the rich research that has taken place over the last few years, or really over the last decade, is now being stalled by, certain decisions at the government level. So it has unfortunately, detrimental consequences to the progress that we have in research. And we will all feel it and be affected by it at some point in time, unfortunately. But I'm always trying to paint with a more optimistic lens and trying to see how can we mobilize our current
Hmm.
resources from the
Right.
research that we've already accomplished and doing what we can, because we've always been a strong people.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have folks like myself, we have folks like you. You have access to this platform. I have access to, the data that we produce so far. So even though we've stalled, we won't ever be totally stagnant. So that's the
Right.
positive attitude that I try to go away with. But I do need people to understand the importance of the research that we do and the detrimental effects that some policy decisions can have on you personally. Many times the people don't see how,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
these millions of dollars have been taken away, but that's okay. It won't trickle down to me. You don't know that until it does, until
Right.
your family member is affected by prostate cancer and they don't have access to the treatment that could have been created by this entity or that was being created by this academic institution or other laboratory at the time, but funding was cut. And now you unfortunately don't have access to that treatment anymore. It's not until it personally affects you, but you shouldn't look at it that way. Everybody should be outraged at this point,
Hmm.
seeing the types of grants that are being cut from, my fellow colleagues across this, academic landscape. It is very unfortunate, but again, we're resilient, and you and I will, keep our hands on the plow, and
Absolutely.
we're going to keep this thing moving. We're going to
Yeah.
keep it moving.
And to your point, I mean, being when I was diagnosed again with the biochemical reoccurrence, there was a lot of in just a 10-12 year period, so many different things that had happened to help diagnosis and things like that that wasn't available, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And we're going to really, on the next episode, actually talk to some researchers that are doing this work and talk about what's on the horizon and what are some of the challenges in this current landscape. But I want to thank you, Dr. Owens, for your powerful insight and your dedication to prostate cancer equity and innovation. We really appreciate you joining us. And on a personal note, my mom passed away from Alzheimer's, and I know that we talked about at the beginning. Your aunt had dementia, and how you kind of
Mhm.
got involved in the research that you're doing with people who are aging and dementia. And I would love to have you back on another episode. We actually have another podcast that I'm gonna have to get you on to talk about
Okay.
that at home thing that you're doing and monitoring and trying to keep people in there in place as they
Looking
age.
forward
I think
to
this is with the boomers, and we're all getting old.
it.
So that's because we did, it's either getting old or there's the other that's not getting old, which nobody
Exactly.
wants to deal with that, right? So I would really be interested in having you back, and we can talk about that. But I want to thank you, real insightful, and we're gonna get behind you, keep you in prayer, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate the invitation and keep doing the work that you're doing, the good work. And because we need shows like this one that can get the word out about the seriousness of this, but also to show yourself as a testament to what can happen when you are proactive and you do ask the right questions and you aren't afraid. You don't succumb to the stigma around prostate cancer because a lot of men, there's so many men who have dealt with prostate cancer, maybe even had it treated, and you'll still never know. And they'll be
Yep,
in your own families.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, Dr. Owens, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right. And to you watching or listening, thank you for being a part of this conversation. We hope today's episode gave you knowledge and strength and encouragement. And if this resonated with you, please share it with a loved one, subscribe, leave us a message at our website. You can connect with us and listen to past episodes at ifyouaremybrothers.org. That's ifyouaremybrothers.org, and follow us on social media. Now, the audio version of this episode will be available next Tuesday on our podcast, and it'll be available on Apple and Spotify, all the major platforms. Also, all the episodes are archived on our YouTube channel and on our website. So, and of course, on all the podcast platforms. So there's so many ways for you to share and listen and really get involved. As Dr. Owen said, we got to get the word out. Even if you just know your PSA and track that, that's the first step. So it's not about it's about health awareness, but it's also about health action. Now, something new. This episode is sponsored by the Creator's Nature Blend, which is pure and natural herb and serums and oils and tonics handcrafted with homegrown and wild crafted ingredients, and they are a sponsor, and we appreciate them. I'm telling you that bitter melon, I'm gonna have to get that because it has a lot of benefits. You can learn more about the Creators Natural Blend at thecreatorsnaturalblend.com. And finally, if you're in the Atlanta area, we want to invite you to join us at the National Black Arts Festival Thriving Together event. Now, the National Black Arts Festival is a national arts festival, been around, originated here in Atlanta, and they are having their first ever kind of art and wellness event. It's going to be Saturday, September 27th at the historic Fourth Ward Skate Park. If you can say that fast, you're great. It's a free event, by the way, a free day of art, wellness, community focused on racial health equity. And you can find out more. There's a QR code right there. If you are listening, it'll be in the show notes, but also you can visit nbaf.org for more details. And we'll be there. We'll be there. We have a little tent. So come by and see us. Working on hopefully getting some screenings available there as well. So come by and get some of our swag. And we really like to talk to you and get to know you and, be a part. So again, that's the Art and Wellness Festival is September 27th at the historic Fourth Ward Skate Park, Saturday, September 27th, all day from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And also, not just there'll be health activities and yoga and things like that, but also a lot of jazz and other entertainers as well. So join us for that. Special thanks to our producer, Danny Garcia Pozo. He still has hair because we got things going on and he's always pulling on it. So, he still got it though. And to Zach Reynolds at Borkhouse Productions out of Chattanooga for our opening. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider about your health. And we'll see you next time. But we want to remind you, you can also support this podcast a number of ways. We are a nonprofit 501c3 project, and we hope that you will take the opportunity. There you go. Thank you so much, Danny. I see I got a little ahead of myself. So Danny's like, he's not going to talk about how to support. But there we have a lot of ways to give. You can scan the QR code that you see on the screen. You can visit our website at ifyouaremybrothers.org/donate, or you can always mail us a check. We'll take that as well. The address is there. Our phone number is there. We want to not just talk about support, but also not support financially, but also support just being there for you if you need to talk. The website has resources as well. We'd love to have you go and look around. Contact us if you would like us to come out and do a presentation or speak to your group. We would love to do that. So again, that's all at the website, ifyouaremybrothers.org. We want to remind you too that our next episode will be next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern for our third episode in the series, The Future of Prostate Cancer Care, Breakthroughs on the Horizon. We just talked a little bit about that with Dr. Owens, but we're going to really delve into some major researchers that are working at the molecular level to make these breakthroughs. And so it's going to be interesting to talk to them. Hopefully I'll be able to put it in layman's terms. So, it's maybe a little over my head, but we're going to try to bring it down so that we can learn more about what is happening with treatment and things that are, going to help us in the future. If You Are My Brothers is a project of Straight Street Media. You can learn more about that at straightstreetmedia.org. So until next time, if you are my brothers, we ask you to know your PSA and share this message with someone. Do that this week. All right. Until next time, we'll see you around. Peace.